Captain Jinho Park stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars. The year was 2387, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for 15 years now. But they were still the youngest members, and most other species still looked down on them. His ship, the Aegis, was patrolling near Valoran space. The Valorans were humanity's closest friends in the galaxy. While other alien races called humans primitive warmongers, the Valorans had welcomed them with open arms. "Captain, we're getting a message from the Valoran fleet," said Lieutenant Hana Shin from her station. "Put it through," Jinho replied. The hologram of Commander Minji Kim appeared. She was Earth's military liaison to the Valoran Defense Forces. Behind her, Jinho could see the beautiful crystal ships of their allies floating in space like living gems. "Jinho, we need to talk," Minji said, her face serious. "The Council is making moves against the Valorans." Jinho frowned. The Galactic Council was supposed to keep peace in the galaxy, but lately they had been acting more like bullies. The ancient species that ran the Council, the cold Nexari and the bureaucratic hegemony, didn't like that the Valorans refused to bow down to them. "What kind of moves?" Jinho asked. "They're saying the Valorans are hiding dangerous weapons. Complete lies, of course. The Valorans are pacifists. They wouldn't hurt a fly unless they had to defend themselves." Jinho knew this was true. In all his years working with the Valorans, he had never met a more peaceful species. They were tall, graceful beings made of living crystal that could bend light into beautiful patterns. Their ships looked more like art than weapons of war. Ambassador Kyung Lee had spent years building the friendship between humans and Valorans. She often said they were kindred spirits. Both species valued honor and loyalty over the political, games that other Council races loved to play. "The Council wants the Valoran systems," Minji continued. "Those crystal formations aren't just pretty. They're the most efficient energy sources in the galaxy. The Council has been trying to get their hands on them for decades. And now they think they can just take them?" Jinho asked. "That's what it looks like. The Valorans are asking for our help under the treaty." Jinho nodded. 3 years ago, humanity and the Valorans had signed a mutual defense pact. If either species was attacked, the other would come to their aid. It had seemed like a good idea. At the time, two smaller species standing together against the galaxy's bullies. Admiral Sunho Choi's voice crackled over the comm system. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. We've received an encrypted message from Valoran space. Council forces are moving against Valoran worlds. The treaty has been invoked." Jinho felt his stomach drop. The treaty meant that humanity was now at war with the Galactic Council. The same council that had thousands of ships for every one that humanity could field. The same council that had technology that was centuries ahead of anything Earth could build. "Sir, what are our orders?" asked Lieutenant Shin. Before Jinho could answer, another message came through. This time it was from Dr. Junho Kang, who was serving with the Human Medical Corps near Valoran space. "This is Dr. Kang. I'm seeing massive Council fleet movements toward the Valoran homeworld. Hundreds of ships, including the big dreadnoughts. This isn't a peacekeeping mission. This is an invasion force." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The Council wasn't just threatening the Valorans anymore. They were actually going to attack them. Captain Dayan Song's voice came over the emergency channel. She commanded the medical frigate Mercy. "I'm picking up distress signals from Valoran civilian ships. They're trying to evacuate, but Council forces are moving to cut them off." Jinho made his decision. "All stations battle alert. Set course for Valoran space. Maximum speed." "Sir," Lieutenant Shin said quietly, "we're just one ship. What can we do against a Council invasion fleet?" Jinho looked at her, then at the rest of his crew. They were young. Most of them had never seen real combat. But they had heart, and they had honor. That had to count for something. "We keep our word," he said simply. "The Valorans stood by us when no one else would. Now it's our turn to stand by them." As the Aegis jumped to hyperspace, Jinho thought about Ambassador Kyung Lee's words from the treaty signing ceremony. She had said that true friendship wasn't about having the same interests. It was about standing together when things got tough. Well, things were definitely getting tough now. The journey to Valoran space took 6 hours. During that time, the reports kept coming in. Council forces were surrounding every Valoran system. They claimed it was to secure dangerous technologies, but everyone knew the real reason. The Council wanted the Valoran crystal energy sources, and they were willing to start a war to get them. Commander Taewon Yoon, captain of the Defender, sent a message to all human ships in the area. The Council has made their choice. They think they can bully peaceful people and steal their homes. They think we'll just stand by and watch because we're outnumbered. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was hard as steel. They're about to learn how wrong they are. When the Aegis dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Valoran space, Jinho saw something that made his blood run cold. The beautiful crystal formations that had once decorated Valoran ships were dim and flickering. Many of the elegant vessels were already damaged or destroyed. "Captain," Lieutenant Shin said, her voice shaking, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the Valoran homeworld. It looks like orbital bombardment." Jinho closed his eyes for a moment. The Council wasn't just invading Valoran space, they were destroying it. "Get me Admiral Choi," he said. The Admiral's face appeared on screen, grim and determined. "Jinho, I know what you're thinking, but we can't win this fight with conventional tactics. The Council has too many ships, too much firepower." "Then what do we do, sir?" Admiral Choi was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator. "We stop fighting like civilized people," he said. "The Council wants to play dirty? Fine. Let's show them what humans are really capable of when they get angry." As Jinho watched the destruction of Valoran civilization unfold on his screens, he felt something change inside him. The naive young captain who had believed in galactic justice and fair play was dying, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. The Council had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. Captain Daeun's song was trying to save lives when the real horror began. Her medical ship, the Mercy, had been racing toward Valoran space for hours, following distress signals from civilian evacuation ships. The Valorans were peaceful people, and their ships weren't built for war. "Captain, I'm picking up massive weapons fire from the homeworld," said her communications officer. It's not good." Daeun looked at the tactical display and felt sick. Hundreds of Council warships surrounded Luminos Prime, the beautiful crystal world where the Valorans had lived for thousands of years. The planet's surface sparkled like a jewel, but now it was under attack. Commander Taewon Yoon was aboard the Defender, trying to coordinate with what was left of the Valoran defense fleet. Their crystal ships were elegant and could bend light into powerful weapons, but they were no match for the Council's massive dreadnoughts. "This is War Master Vex of the Nexari fleet," came a cold voice over the emergency channels. "All Valoran vessels will surrender immediately. Any ship that resists will be destroyed." Surrender? Taewon couldn't believe what he was hearing. They're attacking a peaceful world with no warning, and they want them to surrender? The answer came in the form of weapons fire. Council ships opened up on a group of Valoran civilian transports that were trying to evacuate children from the planet's surface. The beautiful crystal ships shattered like glass, their light-based occupants dying as their physical forms were destroyed. Dr. Junho Kang was aboard one of the human medical ships when the first refugees arrived. The Valorans' biology was unlike anything else in the galaxy. They were beings of living crystal and light. When they were injured, their bodies cracked and their inner light grew dim. "Help us," whispered a young Valoran as Dr. Kang tried to repair the crystal fractures that were spreading across her body. "Why are they doing this to us? We never hurt anyone." Dr. Kang had no answer. The official council statement claimed the Valorans were hiding dangerous technologies that threatened galactic security, but Lieutenant Hana Shin had intercepted the real communications between council commanders. The truth was much simpler and much uglier. "They want the energy crystals," Lieutenant Shin reported to Captain Daeun Song. "The council has decided that Valoran technology is too valuable to leave in the hands of what they call lesser species. This isn't about security. It's about greed." The bombardment of Luminos Prime began at dawn, local time. Captain Boram Che was supposed to stay back with the other human ships, following orders to observe but not engage. But when she saw council forces deliberately targeting schools and hospitals, she couldn't stand by and watch. "All fighters, follow me in," she ordered, leading her squadron toward the planet's surface. "We're going to save who we can." Her fighters were no match for the council's heavy ships, but they were fast and determined. They managed to reach 3 evacuation transports and provide escort, but it wasn't nearly enough. The systematic slaughter continued for hours. Council forces weren't just trying to defeat the Valoran military. They were trying to wipe out the entire species. Ancient crystal cities that had stood for millennia were reduced to glittering dust. Parks and gardens where Valoran children had played were turned into craters. Commander Minji Kim watched in horror from the bridge of her ship as council forces hunted down fleeing civilian vessels. The Valorans' ships were works of art, never designed for combat. They cracked and shattered under the council's guns like delicate ornaments. "They're not even trying to capture them," she said to her tactical officer. "They're just killing everyone they can find." The worst part came when the Valoran leadership tried to surrender. Elder Christos, the ancient being who had ruled the Valorans for 1,000 years, sent a message on all frequencies offering to give the council whatever they wanted if they would just stop the killing. The council's response was to target his personal ship with every weapon they had. The magnificent crystal vessel, which had been a symbol of Valoran civilization for centuries, was vaporized in seconds. By the time human reinforcements arrived, it was too late. Captain Jinho Park brought the Aegis in at maximum speed, but the battle was already over. Luminos Prime was a graveyard, its crystal cities dark and broken. The few surviving Valoran ships drifted in space like fragments of shattered dreams. "Casualty report," Admiral Sunho Choi requested over the command channel. The numbers were almost impossible to believe. Over 8 million Valorans were dead. An entire civilization had been wiped out in a single day. The survivors, less than 1 million scattered across various ships and outposts, spoke of council forces specifically targeting anyone who tried to help the wounded or evacuate civilians. Dr. Junho Kang worked frantically to treat the survivors, but many were dying from injuries that couldn't be healed. The Valorans' crystal bodies were cracking beyond repair, their inner light fading like dying stars. "They made sure we couldn't rebuild," whispered one of the survivors, an elderly Valoran whose crystal form was spiderwebbed with fractures. "They didn't just destroy our cities, they destroyed our ability to create new crystal formations. Our children will have nowhere to grow." The Galactic Council's official statement was broadcast across the galaxy that evening. They announced that the Valoran rebellion had been successfully put down and that Valoran space would be placed under council administration for the security of all peaceful species. There had been no rebellion. There had been no resistance until the very end. The Valorans had died because they possessed something the council wanted and because they had been friends with humanity. Captain Daeun Song stood in the medical bay of her ship, looking at the rows of injured Valorans. Some were children, their small crystal bodies dim and broken. Others were elders who had lived for centuries, now dying far from their shattered home. "What do we tell them?" asked Dr. Kang quietly. "How do we explain that this happened? Because they were our friends?" Daeun didn't have an answer. But as she watched the last lights of Valoran civilization flickering and dying, she felt something cold and hard growing in her chest. The Council thought they could commit genocide and call it peacekeeping. They thought they could murder an entire species, and the galaxy would just accept it. They were wrong. Admiral Choi's voice came over the comm system, addressing all human forces in the area. All ships, return to base. We have work to do. As the HFY human fleet prepared to leave the ruins of Valoran space, Captain Boram Che made a promise to the survivors. This isn't over. The Council thinks they can kill your people and walk away. They're about to learn what happens when you murder humanity's friends. The Valorans had welcomed humanity to the galaxy with open arms. They had offered friendship when no one else would, and the Council had slaughtered them for it. Now it was time for humanity to show the galaxy what they had really learned from 15 years among the stars. President Soyeon Lim stood before the emergency meeting of Earth's Global Defense Assembly. Behind her, massive screens showed the destruction of Luminos Prime. Crystal cities turned to ash, broken Valoran ships drifting in space, and the bodies of 8 million peaceful beings who had died for the crime of being humanity's friends. The assembly hall was dead silent as the images played. Representatives from every nation on Earth watched the systematic slaughter of their closest galactic allies. Some were crying. Others sat in stunned shock. But all of them felt the same burning rage that was spreading through human space like wildfire. The Galactic Council has shown us who they really are, President Lim said, her voice steady despite the anger in her eyes. For 15 years, we tried to be good members of their club. We followed their rules, respected their customs, and believed their promises about peace and justice. She gestured to the screens showing dead Valorans. This is what their peace looks like. This is their justice. General Woo Jin Park stepped forward with the military assessment. The numbers were not encouraging. Earth had maybe 300 warships spread across human space. The Council had thousands. Human technology was decades behind the ancient civilizations that ruled the galaxy. Any direct military confrontation seemed like suicide. They outgun us 10-1, General Park reported. Their shields can stop our best weapons. Their ships are faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything we can build. By every military measure, we cannot win this fight. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. If they couldn't win, what was the point of fighting? Some representatives began talking about negotiation, about finding a peaceful solution. Admiral Yuna Hong stood up from her seat. She was old for an active military officer, but her eyes burned with the fire of someone who had studied war her entire life. General Park is right about their advantages, she said. But he's missing something important. She walked to the front of the room, her boots clicking on the metal floor. The Council expects us to fight like civilized people. They expect formal declarations of war, honorable combat between matched fleets, and surrender when we're obviously beaten. They've been fighting the same way for thousands of years. Admiral Hong smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. They have no idea what desperate humans can do when someone murders their friends. Foreign Minister Hyun-Sik Cho had already prepared humanity's response to the Council. It would be broadcast on every frequency, sent to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The message was simple and direct. The Galactic Council has violated every principle they claim to stand for, the message began. They have committed genocide against a peaceful species whose only crime was friendship with humanity. The Valoran people trusted us to protect them, and we failed. But their deaths will not be forgotten, and they will not go unpunished. The message continued with words that would echo through the galaxy for generations. To the Council, we say this. You wanted to show the galaxy what happens to species that stand with humanity. Very well. Now you will learn what happens to those who stand against us. Director Nara Yu of Earth's intelligence services had been quietly preparing for this moment for years. While diplomats talked about peace and cooperation, she had been mapping Council weaknesses, studying their military doctrines, and identifying targets that could bring their ancient empire to its knees. The Council rules through fear and overwhelming force, she told the Assembly. But they've grown soft over the millennia. They haven't fought a real war in centuries. Their security is designed to stop formal invasions and political intrigue, not the kind of warfare we're about to unleash. She pulled up holographic displays showing Council infrastructure across the galaxy, trade routes that kept their economy running, communication networks that held their empire together, industrial centers that produced their advanced technology. All of this depends on the assumption that their enemies will play by the rules, Director Yu explained. But we're not going to play by their rules anymore. Colonel Sungmin Im was already mobilizing Earth's secret military assets. For years, human intelligence had been building ghost fleets, ships that didn't officially exist, crews with no records, weapons that violated every galactic treaty. The Council had always assumed these were just rumors. They were about to discover how wrong they were. We have approximately 50 vessels that the Council doesn't know about, Colonel Im reported. They're equipped with weapons and systems that we reverse-engineered from captured Council technology. More importantly, they're crewed by volunteers who understand that this is a war of extermination. President Lim addressed the Assembly one final time. The Council thinks we're a young species that will back down when faced with superior force. They think we'll negotiate, compromise, and eventually accept the murder of our friends as the price of galactic citizenship. She paused, looking out at the representatives who would decide humanity's fate. They clearly don't understand who they're dealing with. Humans don't forget. We don't forgive. And we sure as hell don't let the murder of 8 million innocent people go unanswered. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was going to war. The Council's response came within hours. A massive fleet of dreadnoughts appeared at the edge of the Sol system, led by the same Nexari war master who had orchestrated the Valoran massacre. The message they sent was arrogant and condescending. This is War Master Vex of the Nexari fleet. The species known as humanity will surrender immediately and submit to Council justice for their illegal threats. Your primitive vessels will stand down, and your leaders will present themselves for judgment. Admiral Kangmin Yu commanded Earth's official battle fleet from the bridge of the last official Earth battleship. He looked at the massive Council armada on his tactical display and smiled grimly. "Send them our response," he ordered. The response was not words, it was action. Every human ship in the Sol system simply vanished. Not destroyed, gone. Disappeared. Into space, as if they had never existed. War Master Vex found himself staring at empty space where Earth's fleet had been moments before. "Where did they go?" he demanded. His tactical officer checked and rechecked the sensors. "Unknown, sir. They just left." What the Council fleet discovered next shook them to their core. Earth itself was empty. The entire human population, over 12 billion people, had simply vanished. Cities stood empty, but there were no bodies, no signs of struggle. It was as if humanity had just decided to disappear. Director Sanhabei had overseen the greatest evacuation in galactic history. Over the past year, every human civilian had been quietly relocated to hidden colonies and mobile habitats scattered throughout human space. Earth wasn't humanity's home anymore. It was bait. The blue world that had been humanity's cradle was now a trap, bristling with automated defenses and enough firepower to crack a moon. When the Council finally approached the empty planet, they discovered what humans meant by playing dirty. The booby traps killed half the landing force before they even reached the surface. But that was just the beginning. While the Council wasted time conquering an empty world, humanity's real war machine was already in motion. Ghost ships struck at Council supply lines. Hidden bases launched attacks on isolated outposts. Human agents activated sleeper cells that had been dormant for years. The message was clear. The Council had wanted to show the galaxy what happened to species that befriended humanity. Now they would learn what happened to species that murdered humanity's friends. The War for Valoran. Justice had begun, and humanity intended to finish it. Captain Ji-hyo Nam guided her ship through the asteroid field, watching the Council supply convoy on her tactical display. The Ghost was one of humanity's phantom vessels. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it was about to remind the galaxy why humans were feared as warriors long before they reached the stars. 6 months since Luminous Prime, she said quietly to her crew. 6 months since they murdered our friends and thought we'd just accept it. The Council convoy was massive, a dozen cargo ships carrying supplies to their occupation forces in former Valoran space, escorted by 3 heavy cruisers. Under the old rules of galactic warfare, Captain Nam's single ship wouldn't even think about attacking such a force. But humanity had thrown out the old rules along with everything else they'd learned about civilized behavior. "All weapons armed," reported her tactical officer. "Kinetic rounds loaded with the special payloads." The special payloads were Captain Nam's own invention. Kinetic rounds filled with a substance that human scientists had developed from studying Valoran crystal fragments. When they hit Council ships, they didn't just punch holes. They spread through the hull like acid, eating away at the elegant alien metals until entire vessels simply fell apart. "Target the escorts first," Captain Nam ordered. "Remember, we're not here to capture anything. We're here to send a message." The Ghost emerged from behind a spinning asteroid and unleashed hell. The kinetic rounds struck the lead Council cruiser before its shields could even activate. The proud vessel, which had probably existed for centuries, dissolved into expanding clouds of debris in seconds. The other 2 escorts tried to respond, but Commander Dong-Yun Lee had taught all the human raiders the new tactics. Don't fight. Fair. Don't give warnings. Don't take prisoners. Hit fast, hit hard, and disappear before the enemy can react. By the time the Council ships realized they were under attack, it was already over. The Ghost vanished back into the asteroid field, leaving nothing but wreckage and a message carved into the hull of the one cargo ship they'd left alive. "Remember, Luminous Prime." The psychological impact of raids like this was exactly what humanity wanted. Council military analysts had spent months trying to understand how their enemies thought, but humans didn't think like other galactic species. They were willing to break every rule of warfare if it meant winning. Lieutenant Yeren Jang specialized in what the Council called terror tactics, though humans simply called it being thorough. Her team would board Council stations, eliminate the crew with brutal efficiency, and leave evidence of their visit in places where it would be found by the next shift. The Council had expected human attacks to follow standard galactic protocols. Formal challenges between ship commanders, honor duels with agreed-upon rules, civilized surrender when one side was clearly beaten. Instead, they got boarding parties that killed everyone they could find and left the survivors with nightmares. "The humans don't fight like soldiers," one shaken Council officer reported after surviving one of Lieutenant Jang's raids. "They fight like animals, like something wild and angry that just wants to hurt you back." That was exactly the impression humanity wanted to create. Major In-woo Seo led Earth's cyber warfare division in systematic attacks on Council communication networks. But they didn't just disable enemy systems, they turned them into weapons. Council ships would suddenly find their own computers attacking them, causing life support failures, navigation errors, and weapons malfunctions. The worst part was the psychological warfare embedded in every virus. Council commanders would wake up to find their personal quarters filled with holographic images of dead Valorans. Their communication systems would play recordings of Valoran children calling for help during the massacre. Their tactical displays would randomly show the coordinates of Luminous Prime and a countdown timer marking how long ago their friends had died. "It's not enough to defeat them," Major Seo explained to his team. "We need to make them afraid to sleep at night. We need them to remember what they did every time they closed their eyes." The Council's response was predictable but useless. They sent massive fleets to patrol trade routes and protect important installations. But humanity's ghost ships could strike anywhere, anytime, and then vanish before reinforcements arrived. Admiral Kangman Yu watched from his hidden command center as Council dreadnoughts approached the Sol system again. The enemy fleet was even larger this time, enough firepower to glass Earth's surface 10 times over. "Think they've figured out the trap yet?" asked his tactical officer. Admiral Yu smiled grimly. "Doesn't matter. Earth was never the real target. Anyway, while the Council wasted time and resources trying to capture an empty world, human raiders were striking at targets across the galaxy. Trade routes became killing fields, industrial centers were sabotaged or destroyed. Council colonies found themselves cut off from supply lines and left to starve. The beauty of it was that humanity didn't need to win big battles or capture territory. They just needed to make the Council's empire too expensive to maintain. Every convoy that disappeared meant higher insurance costs. Every sabotaged factory meant supply shortages. Every successful raid meant the Council had to divert more ships to defensive duties. Director Sanha Bey coordinated the evacuation efforts that kept human civilians safe while their military went to war. The entire human population was now scattered across hundreds of hidden colonies and mobile habitats. Some were built inside asteroids. Others were camouflaged space stations that looked like debris fields. A few were actual ships that never stayed in one place for more than a few days. "The Council thinks they can win by threatening our homeworld," Director Bey explained to the civilian leaders. "But we don't have a homeworld anymore. We have 1,000 homes scattered across the galaxy, and they can't find all of them." It was a new kind of warfare. Not armies fighting for territory, but an entire civilization becoming a weapon. Every human was a potential soldier. Every hidden base was a potential launch point for raids. Every civilian transport could be carrying commandos or weapons. The Council had ruled the galaxy for millennia through overwhelming force and political manipulation. They were used to enemies who fought like them. Formally, predictably, with clear objectives and negotiable terms. They had no idea how to fight an enemy that didn't want to conquer anything, didn't care about territorial gains, and had only one goal: revenge. Captain Yunbi Kill led boarding operations against Council flagships, but her teams weren't interested in capturing advanced technology or taking important prisoners. They came to kill, and they did so with a methodical brutality that horrified even veteran Council warriors. "Why?" gasped a dying Council admiral as Captain Kill's team systematically eliminated his bridge crew. "What do you want from us, Captain?" Kill looked down at him with cold eyes. "We want you to remember Luminos Prime. We want you to understand what happens when you murder our friends. But mostly, we just want you to die." The Council tried everything they could think of to stop the human raiders. They reinforced their patrols, upgraded their security, and even hired mercenaries from species that specialized in irregular warfare. Nothing worked. The humans seemed to anticipate every move, counter every strategy, and strike wherever the Council was weakest. What the Council didn't understand was that this wasn't just military strategy, it was personal. Every human who had seen the images from Luminos Prime carried the same burning rage. Every raid was motivated not by orders from above, but by the memory of 8 million murdered friends. Commander Hyunwoo An perfectly embodied this new human approach to warfare. His raiders turned trade routes into death traps, showing no mercy to anyone flying under Council flags. They claimed that anyone supporting the Council's economy was a legitimate target, which meant that civilian merchants and cargo haulers died alongside military personnel. "They started this war by targeting civilians," Commander An said when questioned about his tactics. "They killed Valoran children and called it peacekeeping. Now they complain when we do the same thing to them?" The galaxy watched in growing horror as humanity abandoned every principle of civilized warfare. They had become something new and terrible, a species that fought not for conquest or territory, but for the simple satisfaction of making their enemies suffer. Senator Mina Ko had spent her entire career building bridges between humanity and other species, but now she found herself planning the systematic destruction of everything the Galactic Council had built. The woman who had once given speeches about peace and cooperation was now coordinating the deadliest campaign of revenge the galaxy had ever seen. "The moderate voices are dead," she told the War Council from her hidden command center. "The Council killed them along with 8 million. Valorans. What's left is simple, them or us." 2 years into the war, humanity had evolved from desperate raiders into something much more dangerous. They had become a cancer in the galaxy's body, growing stronger as they consumed everything around them. And they were winning. Admiral Jaehun, Ryu commanded the human fleet that struck at the Nexari homeworld's orbital manufacturing platforms. The attack was a masterpiece of coordinated destruction that reduced 3,000 years of industrial development to floating scrap in less than 20 minutes. No warnings, no demands, no negotiations, Admiral Rao reported as his ships prepared to jump away from the devastated Nexari facilities. "We came. We destroyed. We left. The message is the destruction itself." The Nexari had been one of the Council's founding species, their cold logic and advanced technology making them natural leaders. But logic meant nothing when facing an enemy that didn't care about cost-benefit analysis or acceptable losses. The humans simply wanted the Nexari to suffer, and they were very good at making that happen. Captain Yunbi Kill led the boarding operations that had become humanity's signature tactic. But her teams weren't capturing Council ships anymore. They were turning them into floating graveyards. The humans would board a vessel, kill everyone on it, and leave it drifting in space as a warning to others. "We're not pirates," Captain Kill explained to her team before a particularly difficult mission. "Pirates want treasure. We want them to be afraid to leave port. We want them to wake up screaming in the middle of the night. We want them to understand what the Valorans felt in their last moments." Her methods worked. Council shipping had dropped by 70% as merchant captains refused to take routes through areas where human raiders operated. The galaxy's economy was slowly strangling itself as trade networks that had existed for millennia simply stopped functioning. The Council tried to adapt, but they were fighting an enemy that broke all their rules. Commander Hyunwoo An and his raiders had turned what used to be safe trade routes into hunting grounds where Council ships disappeared without trace. They showed no mercy to non-combatants, claiming that anyone supporting the Council's war effort was a legitimate target. "You want to call us terrorists?" Commander An asked during a broadcast that was sent to every Council world. "Fine. We're terrorists. But we learned from the best teachers in the galaxy, you. The difference is, we're honest about what we are." The turning point came when Dr. Soo-young Bak finished developing biological weapons specifically designed to target Council species. The first plague hit a hegemony world 3 years into the war, killing 2 million beings in less than a week. The disease was engineered to attack the cellular structure that all hegemony species shared, making it impossible to stop once it started spreading. The Council finally understood that they weren't just fighting a military campaign anymore. They were fighting for their survival as species. "How is this possible?" demanded Councilor Vex during an emergency session on the Nexari homeworld. "Humans are supposed to be primitives. Their technology is centuries behind ours. How are they creating weapons that our best scientists can't even understand, let alone counter?" The answer was simple but terrifying. Humanity had always been good at 2 things: learning from their enemies and adapting to survive. 3 years of total war had turned them into something new, a species that existed only to make their enemies suffer. General Changmin-O orchestrated the campaign that finally broke the Council's spirit. Human forces began systematically targeting cultural sites, ancient monuments, religious centers, repositories of art and knowledge that had survived for millions of years. Each destruction was accompanied by the same message broadcast on all frequencies. "This is for the Valorans you murdered. The Council had ruled through fear and overwhelming power for eons. But now they were the ones living in terror. Their ancient civilizations, which had seemed eternal and unshakable, were being erased from existence by an enemy that fought like a force of nature. The worst part was that the humans seemed to enjoy it. Council intelligence intercepted communications between human raiders that showed them laughing as they destroyed priceless artifacts and historical sites. They weren't just winning the war. They were having fun doing it. "We've created monsters," whispered one council diplomat during a secret meeting to discuss surrender terms. "We turned a young species into something that exists only to cause pain and destruction. What have we done?" But it was too late for regrets. The war had taken on a life of its own, driven by human rage that seemed to grow stronger with each council defeat. Senator Mina Ko had become the unofficial leader of the human war effort, and her goals had evolved far beyond simple revenge. "Winning isn't enough anymore," she told her staff during a planning meeting. "We need to make sure this never happens again. We need to break the council so completely that no one will ever think about committing genocide again." The council tried desperate measures to end the war. They offered reparations, territory, even some of their advanced technology. But humanity wasn't interested in negotiations. They had learned that the galaxy respected only one thing: fear. Commander Yesul Jin oversaw the destruction of the Great Library of Altair Prime, a repository of knowledge that contained the accumulated wisdom of 50 different species over millions of years. The building was beautiful beyond description, its crystal spires reaching toward the stars like frozen music. The humans burned it all. Every book, every data crystal, every piece of art that had been preserved for generations. Beyond counting. They did it slowly, methodically, making sure that council forces could watch but not stop them. "Why?" screamed the lead librarian as she watched millennia of knowledge turn to ash. "This belongs to all galactic civilization. You're destroying history itself." Commander Jin looked at her with empty eyes. "You destroyed our friends. Now we're destroying everything you care about. Seems fair to me." The psychological impact was devastating. The council had always believed that some things were sacred, that certain lines would never be crossed even in the worst wars. Humanity showed them how naive they had been. Dr. Gichan Nam led the teams that studied captured council technology, but not to copy it. He was looking for weaknesses, ways to turn their own advanced systems against them. Human scientists had become experts at making beautiful things into weapons of destruction. Their whole civilization is built on the assumption that their enemies will be reasonable, Dr. Nam explained to his research team. They've never faced an enemy that wants to destroy them just for the pleasure of watching them suffer. By the fourth year of the war, the Council was in full retreat. Their fleets avoided human-controlled space entirely. Their colonies were being evacuated as plagues and raiders made normal life impossible. The proud empire that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was collapsing under the weight of human hatred. Director Hyung Yoon maintained the networks of human agents scattered throughout Council space, ensuring that no world was safe from human vengeance. The agents weren't spies in the traditional sense. They were saboteurs and assassins whose only job was to make life miserable for anyone who supported the Council. "We're not trying to win hearts and minds," Director Yoon explained to her operatives. "We're trying to make them too afraid to get out of bed in the morning. We want them to understand that there's no safe place in the galaxy for people who murder our friends." The galaxy had learned to fear humanity, but it was too late. The damage was done, the lesson taught. The Council's ancient empire was dying, killed not by superior technology or brilliant strategy, but by simple human spite. Ambassador Jaseok stood in the ruins of what had once been the most beautiful building in the galaxy. The Galactic Council chambers had been a masterpiece of architecture, representing the combined artistic traditions of hundreds of species, over millions of years. Now it was just broken stone and twisted metal, scarred by weapons fire and stained with blood. The surviving council representatives sat in what remained of their seats, looking like broken dolls. These were beings who had once ruled star systems with a word, who had commanded fleets that could crack planets. Now they waited to learn their fate from the species they had once dismissed as primitive barbarians. "The war is over," Ambassador O announced, his voice echoing in the ruined chamber. "The Galactic Council formally surrenders to humanity. All Council military forces will stand down immediately. All occupied territories will be returned to their rightful owners or placed under human administration. 4 years. The war had lasted 4 years and cost billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. The galaxy's greatest civilizations lay in ruins, their ancient cultures reduced to ash and memory, and humanity had won it all through the simple application of unlimited hatred. President Chae-Young Lee would never see this moment. She had died 2 years earlier during the siege of Alpha Centauri, along with most of Earth's original leadership. The humans who emerged victorious from the war were harder, colder, shaped by years of conflict that had consumed their civilization's soul. Admiral Seojin Moon commanded the human fleets that now patrolled former Council space, making sure that the surviving species understood their new place in the galactic order. His ships were sleek and deadly, built from technology taken from a dozen different worlds and improved by human ingenuity. "There will be no rebuilding," Admiral Moon announced during his first broadcast to Council worlds. "There will be no return to the old ways. The galaxy belongs to humanity now, and we will decide who lives, who dies, and who gets to keep their worlds." The terms of surrender were simple and brutal. All Council military technology would be turned over to human forces. All industrial facilities would be converted to serve human needs. Any species that showed signs of resistance would be eliminated completely, just like the Valorans had been. Commander Yeseol-jin oversaw the construction of the memorial in what had once been Valoran space. Luminos Prime was gone, its crystal cities reduced to dust, but humanity built something new in its place. 8 million crystal formations, each one representing a murdered Valoran, were arranged in a vast spiral that caught and reflected the light of their dying star. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, a reminder of what happened to those who stood with humanity, and what befell those who betrayed that trust. Visitors from across the galaxy would come to see it and understand that some debts could never be forgiven. They saved us from becoming just another Council client. "Species," Commander Jin said as she watched the memorial's construction. "The least we can do is make sure they're remembered." Dr. Gichon Nam worked tirelessly to preserve what remained of Valoran culture, though there wasn't much left. A few survivors, some recordings of their music, fragments of their art and literature. The rest had been destroyed by Council weapons or lost when their homeworld died. An entire civilization reduced to a few data files, Dr. Nam said sadly as he cataloged the last pieces of Valoran knowledge. "This is what genocide looks like. This is what the Council thought they could get away with." The memorial served another purpose, too. It was a warning to the galaxy about what happened when humanity's friends were harmed. The few surviving Council species made pilgrimages to the memorial, not out of respect, but out of fear. They needed to understand what they had awakened when they murdered the Valorans. The galaxy was quiet now, but it wasn't the peace of contentment. It was the silence of fear. Entire star systems had gone dark rather than risk attracting human attention. Trade routes that had operated for millennia were abandoned. Civilizations that had reached for the stars were now hiding on their homeworlds, afraid to venture into space. Director Ha-Young Yoon maintained the networks of human agents and automated systems that watched every inhabited world. The galaxy was under surveillance now, every communication monitored, every ship tracked. If another species started building weapons or forming alliances, humanity would know about it within hours. "We're not trying to rule them," Director Yoon explained to the new human leadership. We're just making sure they remember who's in charge. Fear is more efficient than armies for keeping the peace. But the victory had come at a terrible cost. The humans who had started the war as idealistic defenders of their friends had become something else entirely. They had traded their innocence for survival, their compassion for victory. The galaxy was theirs now, but they weren't sure if they were still human enough to deserve it. Captain Boram Che, now an admiral, commanded the human forces that patrolled the former Nexari territories. She had been one of the first to fight for the Valorans, driven by a desire to save innocent lives. Now she spent her days making sure that entire species understood their place in the new order. Sometimes I wonder if the Valorans would recognize us anymore, she said, during a private moment with her old friend Captain Daeun Song. We've become everything we used to fight against. Captain Song, now in charge of humanitarian operations, nodded sadly. We had to choose between staying human and staying alive. I think we made the right choice, but I'm not sure we're the same species that the Valorans befriended. The memorial to the Valorans became a place of pilgrimage for humans as well as aliens. Veterans of the war would come to stand among the crystal formations and remember why they had fought. Some wept for their lost friends. Others wept for what they had become in the name of vengeance. General Woojin Park, now elderly and worn down by years of warfare, often visited the memorial. He would stand in the center of the crystal spiral and speak to the empty air, telling the dead Valorans about the galaxy their deaths had created. We kept our promise, he would say. We made sure your murders didn't go unpunished. The council is gone, their empire is dust, and no one will ever forget what happens when humanity's friends are harmed. I hope you would forgive us for what we had to become. The stars themselves seemed dimmer now, as if the galaxy mourned what it had lost in teaching humanity to hate. The ancient council species had learned too late that there were fates worse than death and enemies more dangerous than any monster from the dark between stars. In the end, the Galactic Council had gotten exactly what they deserved. They had wanted to show the galaxy what happened to species that stood with humanity. They had succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares. The galaxy now knew that friendship with humanity was the most precious thing in the universe, and that betraying that friendship was the last mistake anyone would ever make. The war was over. The Valorans were avenged. And in the cold calculus of the cosmos, justice had been served. It didn't matter that the cure had been worse than the disease, or that humanity had become the very monsters they had once fought against. Sometimes, the price of justice was the death of mercy itself. The galaxy would remember that lesson for a very long time.